Mech Pilots, online. BattleTech Manuals, online. Long-term memory, offline. All systems bungled. Initiating BungleTech Podcast.
In our 18th deployment of BungleTech, my spheroid co-host Michael and I discuss a few situations when losing initiative is actually winning. We reflect on the epic Vibro Mine trap we encountered in a recent game in our battlefield outcome report. Discuss an engine critical hit mistake I am relatively confident only we have made. And read a short story from BattleTech Legends, written by Randall N. Slide into those Loremaster robes, MechWarriors. It's time to get philosophical.
Bonus objective. Extraordinary proclamation. Initiating.
Before we start today's episode, a quick message from our con.
Vigilant Clan fellows, the day has come where we have claimed our first Bondsperson. Bondsperson Hilux, your attempted attack on our clan was an honorable one. Allow us to reward you with servitude. Consider it your first taste of honor as a member of our clan. I would also like to congratulate Technician Gus. Their efforts in the capture of Hilux went beyond the duties of the Technician caste. As such, they have been promoted to MechWarrior. Well fought, soldier.
Also, I want to give a quick shout out to the Calgary BattleTech League, which recently ran the Alberta Classic. It was a rad day full of competitive classic BattleTech games, the best type of games. It was super well run, organized, and a blast to play in, and an extra blast to not get last. Barely. A big congrats to JP for getting best overall, Steve for getting best general, Devin for best painted, Lee for best sportsman, and Aaron for wooden spoon, which I think means worst luck or something. A huge thanks to the Council of Jeffs for running the event. It was clearly a lot of work, was very well run, and truly was a blast. How often do you get 3 classic BattleTech games in a day? Excited to participate again in the future.
This is Professor Michael presenting The Sphere We Live In. Perhaps the most extreme example of ambulatory hydrotropism in the known galaxy is found in the Plasco walking trees of Judah. The fluid vessels within the flexible root system of the tree are similar to other hydroflexids, but unique rotating motion produced in the roots allows them to pull the entire tree along at startling speeds. Groves of Plasco trees have been reported as traveling up to 20 kilometers per hour. In addition, chemosensory buds on the branches are able to detect minute concentrations of water in the atmosphere, directing the tree toward bodies of water. Though the mechanism of this communication is unknown, this simple tropic response is often used by the people of Jeddah to route trees away from settlements using canals and retention ponds. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Primary objective. Podcast topic segment. Initiating.
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 18 of BungleTech, a BattleTech podcast. Today, I'm joined once again by the sweetest, the gentlest soul I know, the sensual Michael. Say hello, Michael.
How dare you? I'm not sweet. You're sweet.
Aww, what a sweet thing to say.
I can't keep it up. I am sweet. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you.
I really questioned myself there, realizing that perhaps I was the sweet one, when all this time I thought I was the cantankerous one. Damn. My identity, my character, who am I? I tell you who I am, Michael. I'm a BattleTech fan. And guess what we're doing today? Talking about BattleTech, because that's what we do on this podcast, a BattleTech podcast, in case you or listeners were wondering about what we're doing.
Why are we here?
I don't know, Michael.
What are we doing?
What are we talking about today? What's the topic of conversation? I'll tell you what it is.
No. I thought you want me to. I thought you were passing it over to me. You laid it up so perfect for me. And then when I went to spike it, you're in like, actually.
It was a fake pass. Worry. And now I'm going to do another fake, and then I'm going to pass it back to you. You'll see. Ready for it?
I'm ready.
The topic of today is defeating the tyranny of the BattleTech initiative system. What do I mean by that, Michael?
You mean what happens when losing is winning? Losing initiative is winning the battle.
Exactly. Losing the battle, but winning the war.
Exactly.
Yes.
By losing initiative.
Okay. So what Michael and I have done is we've taken some time to look at rules and think about our experiences and name a few times where actually, you know what? Losing initiative is advantageous for you as a player. I know that lots of times you can be playing a game and you're just constantly losing initiative and you feel behind. You can't crawl out of the ditch. Well, just rely on these very limited situations and strategies, and maybe you'll crawl a little bit out just in time to get decapitated.
And it's maybe worth talking, just as we get started here, clarifying how we tend to play initiative at our table, because I know there's sort of a lot of different initiative systems people use. So Nathan, what do we do for initiative? Tell us about your favorite deck of cards.
Well, we play with the most balanced thing that BattleTech has ever created. The BattleTech initiative deck. It's balanced. It's fair. It's amazing. It's made for competitive play. Right, Michael?
Correct.
Correct. Deadpan correct.
Correct.
Yes, and the initiative deck uses front-loaded initiative a little bit differently, like how it alternates initiative is a little bit different than traditional BattleTech, just slightly different. But that being said, I think that most of the examples we've come up with today don't actually depend on that. These situations would still come about. Maybe not as effectively, but still, well, actually, I think pretty much as effectively. Depends. Yeah. I think it could be good. I think it could work out. I think these strategies are solid. I think I'm only going to use these strategies from now on in games.
But if you were playing with, say, single unitive initiatives, it might get a little bit less relevant. I don't know that we've ever played like that, so.
Yes, so in like narrative-based games where you're rolling per individual unit, I agree. Then it would become a little bit more dicey.
It becomes a lot more dicey, because that's a lot of dice to roll.
That's a lot of dice. The BattleTech way. Keep it dicey, players. All right, let's get into some examples. We've ranted too much. People are like, get to the topic, guys. Stop talking. I want the content.
What is this intro? What are we doing?
The content. Okay, you're going to get the content starting now. What is one situation in which it is better or can be advantageous to lose initiative, to have to move first? Michael, let's start with you.
Well, one of them is just sort of, this is very general. It's almost a bit of a cop-out of an answer, but the tactical benefits, creating opportunities for yourself on the battlefield, moving into good terrain, blocking access to the objectives, getting in your opponent's way, because once your mech has taken in a position, they can't move into the same position without declaring, whatever sort of attack they want to shove you out of the way. So there's lots of opportunities for just, taking up the one good woods hex on a hill, or standing in the way of the only place that had line of sight to the bunker they were trying to destroy. There's tons of opportunities here for just like getting in the way.
Totally. And drawing people into your targets. For example, let's say I have a beefy Banshee. I don't really care about this unit, but I want to get someone to move towards a more ideal position in the long run, a stronger tactical position. Sometimes creating a sweet target opportunity, moving a Banshee straight into the middle, no cover, just accepting the damage, that is a good way to play a longer game. So creating a good target that really entices people, drawing your opponents in so you can distract them and move elsewhere, that is an advantageous way to move first.
That wouldn't work on me. I'm too smart. My tactical brain is too big.
I have bloodthirst. I'm like a berserker whenever I play BattleTech. I just take the drugs and I roll the dice. The first thing in line of sight, man, I'm going for it.
So maybe that's another place where going first in initiative is advantageous for you because you can't be drawn into a trap if you're always moving first.
Yes, that's true. I myself cannot be baited. Tempt me? I don't think so. I'm the tempting one here. I like it. So other than that sort of tactical, specific situation, once again, as Michael said, controlling specific terrain, blocking access to objectives and creating feints and opportunities and draws and lures and stuff like that, there's also some more tangible specific things. Specifically, let's talk about mines. I'll talk about this strategy I encountered very recently, which was very interesting, and it's Vibro Mines. So Vibro Mines, you can shoot them via LRM launchers to certain hexes. I'm sure you can lay them like traditional mines as well. And they are set to blow up when mechs of certain weights get on that hex. However, how the mines go off is they're triggered by a threshold weight. And if a unit is away from the hex and it still covers that threshold, it can trigger the mine. For example, let's say there's a unit in a hex, it's 50 tons. You've set the mine there to be 50 tons. If that unit is in that hex, is moved to that hex, it'll blow up. But let's say there's a unit that is 80 tons and it lands 3 hexes away. For each 10 hexes away from that threshold, the mine will still blow up in that hex. So basically, it senses vibrations to a certain weight sensitivity, and the heavier the weight above that threshold, the easier it is to blow it away. And why this is good is in situations, let's say in a weapon attack phase in the previous turn, you've set the Vibro Mines under the target's feet. If you run a unit close enough to that unit that the Vibro Mines are set at the feet, the Vibro Mines will automatically blow up in the movement phase. No to hit roll, they just automatically hit the legs and nuke that unit. So in that situation, it's a specific strategy that involves you setting up the mines in weapon attack phase in a next turn's movement phase, losing initiative, and moving something close enough to the mines so the mines themselves pop. It's a crazy cool technique and can be quite effective.
Nathan called me right after he'd been subjected to this and couldn't stop gushing about how cool it was that it happened to him.
It's so sick. It weaponizes the movement attack phase in a way that I find very, very unique in BattleTech. So definitely oh my God, what a cool idea.
And it's really weird sort of how this happens. Normally the rules are written really carefully to avoid situations where basically what we're talking about here, situations where losing initiative is advantageous. Normally the sources of damage during the movement phase are entirely self-inflicted. The only time you can get hurt during the movement phase is when you oops-a-daisy and fall down. Minefields sort of break that a bit. It's kind of like an attack that happens during the movement phase, but it's still self-inflicted. You have to trigger it yourself by stepping on the minefield. The Vibro Mines totally violate that, where someone else's movement can trigger this sort of attack against you. And there's very few things that can do that. That's super weird. maybe it's possible that we're like missing some detail here, but overall it's like a really weird interaction to me.
Yeah, it's very cool, and you can build lances around this concept, because remember, when you're shooting a Hex 2, you get a -4 because it's immobile. So you're pretty much guaranteed to shoot the Hex the unit is in. So that's an easy hit. The challenge then becomes getting people close enough to set off those Vibro Mines. And depending on the weight of your units, like for example, I think a Wraith is 50 tons. You set something for like 20 tons, the Vibro Mines, and then you can land up to just 3 hexes away, jump into their back arc or something like that, set off the mines. And once again, the mines are a guaranteed hit. You don't do a 2-hit roll because they just blow up. And when they blow up, they damage everything in the space. And it's all in the legs, so you can really do some badass focused damage. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing. Like it almost feels like something out of a different game. Like BattleTech is usually like quite consistent for, it's a war game, so it needs to move reasonably quickly. So, it's quite straightforward for like, this is the phase where the movement happens. Then you declare your attacks. Then you resolve your attacks. Everything's quite strictly broken out into those phases. This is like some like combo attack from like Lancer or Final Fantasy Tactics or something. Like, it's so weird.
Yeah, I totally agree. It does feel like a weird, trigger combo attack. Like you hit someone, they bounce off here, like you're setting up this elaborate Final Fantasy Tactics chain. But I found it cool. I love discovering little things like that in BattleTech.
Yeah.
But mines are also good for another reason. And why is that, Michael?
So this is again sort of a case where you're doing something in a phase you wouldn't normally be doing it. Specifically, I was looking at mine dispensers, and I don't think this is nearly as like cool or useful, but mine dispensers are something that can be attached to mechs or vehicles or even battle armor, I think, and it lets you drop mines as part of your movement. So either at the start or the end of your movement, you can just plop down a standard strength minefield wherever you are. And this is interesting because during the movement phase, you are altering the battlefield. Normally things you could do to make like hexes no-go zones or something, those would happen during the weapon phase or they'd trigger during the end phase. But this is during the movement phase, you could plop down a new minefield right where you're standing and then move somewhere else and, essentially deny 2 hexes if you under the right conditions.
Yeah. So that's a powerful reason to go first, truly.
We need to go to the lab and we need to figure out like, can we use these mine dispensers alongside Vibro Mines? Maybe there's some synergy here.
I wonder if you can you deploy Vibro Mines? You probably can, right? Through standard mine dispensers.
Yeah, I think the Vibro Mines are just a munition subtype.
So you need like some unit that could enter a hex. So if you could have something that could enter a hex of a opposing mech, place the mines and leave, if that was possible.
What you could do, okay, hang on. I don't know if this works. I haven't run the rules, but could you have you've got, I don't know, battle armor that, are carrying mines or something, and then you have your trigger mech. And then in your movement phase, your battle armor ploop out some mines and jump away. And then your big mech jumps in or jumps out, triggering the Vibro Mines. You could deploy them and activate the Vibro Mines in the same turn, right? Is there an arming time on Vibro Mines?
I don't think so. I don't know. Let's just imagine there isn't. Let's just imagine, let's just build only lances like this from now on. This strategy sounds OP. But you can't interrupt your phase with a placement, right? It has to be beginning or end.
Yeah, I don't think you can ploop them along the way. You may deploy a land type minefield at the beginning or the end of their movement phase.
I see. Okay. So it's not that powerful. But still,
it would be pretty crazy if you could just like drive by minefield on people's feet.
Yeah.
So I understand why you can't do that. But still, being able to drop it where you start, it feels like it has some tactical utility.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like, I don't think it would be broken, overpowered, or anything. I think it would be challenging to build a lance around this. But it's just interesting to me how it sort of like violates the otherwise rules of, weapons come in the weapons phase. But this lets you throw out some minefields when it's not that.
Totally. Well, with that being said, let's move to some advanced rules that actually make it advantageous to lose initiative. One of them is called the Physical Defense Movement mode. Basically, in this mode, the controlling player during the movement phase announces that they're going to do the Physical Defense Movement mode. A unit that does this basically can't expend any MP during this phase, and they can't make any weapon attacks during the weapon attack phase. But during the physical attack phase, they're then allowed to move and do a physical attack. And they can't do charges or death from above because that would be a little bit broken. But what's good about this is, let's say you have someone who you know is going to try to push you off an edge. It's like a very precarious situation. You know someone's going to try to charge you. You know someone's going to try to DFA you. They're really, really, really focused on landing some physical attacks on you. Declaring this at the beginning of the phase means they essentially can't. You can just mitigate it. And yeah, it forces them to change their strategy. So in games that have objective-based conditions, for example, landing a physical attack, landing a charge or something like that, this can be really, really advantageous in those moments.
Yeah, I'm sort of curious. I don't know that I've ever seen this used in one of our games. Probably because you're the only person who knows all these advanced rules, and I don't think you would ever defend. You always attack.
I've never had a situation in which I've decided to use it because I'm such a master tactician that I'm never in a disadvantaged situation when it comes to physical attacks. Because I'm always the one jumping on your head. Ain't nobody gonna jump on my head.
Yeah.
I'm Mario, you're the Goomba.
In a way, this feels like it's sort of like a way to even like mitigate losing initiative. Because, there's usually that dynamic of like, if you win initiative, therefore you go last, you can just step out of the way of any physical attack you want. And if you lose initiative, well, one of your mechs is potentially getting punched this turn.
Exactly. Yeah.
With this, you can avoid that. Or you can actually make one, actually. This would let you potentially, even if the other mech is trying to avoid you, if they stayed too close, you could still manage an attack here if you really manage to, like, corner them in.
Totally. And obviously the cost of it is the fact that basically you can't do weapon attacks and you're just standing there during weapon attack phase. So it's really a situation that you only really want to use when you know someone is using a brawler against you, and that's where their damage is coming from. Maybe like someone who has TSM activated, for example, and is going to come cleave you.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe it's time to activate this attack. Has that ever happened to you, Michael? Have you ever been cleaved by a person using TSM?
I don't think I have been, no.
I see. Something to add to the list.
I look forward to, I'll make lots of physical defense maneuvers next game.
All right, what's another one? What's another advanced rule?
So I think I'll need you to explain this a bit. I've got a particular sub rule, but this is, again, common refrain, doing something outside the usual phase, opportunity fire. That's an advanced rule where during your weapon attack phase, you declare that you're on Overwatch, and then you mark down that it's on Overwatch, and you don't make any attacks that turn. But the next turn, during the movement phase, when an opposing mech moves within your field of fire, you can take a pot shot at them, basically, with some penalties. Like, it's not an easy shot to make, but you can basically make attacks during their movement phase. So Nathan, you'd put this down as something that had initiative benefits. So what are those?
The initiative benefit is not in the phase where you've declared it, but the phase after. So if you can position yourself, and then in the phase after, you lose initiative, you can just keep an overwatch point that then controls the movement, all the movement that comes after you. So all of a sudden you have a sniper point where if anyone moves into that during the movement attack phase after you, you can take an opportunity. So it's a really good way to lock off specific areas of the battlefield. And obviously people can navigate around it. They can say, okay, well, there's the Overwatch field, so I'm not going to go there. But that's the point. Losing initiative means that, well, they all have to move after you. So you hold that position and you just take your shots when you want to and let them know that, yeah, you can move through this zone if you want to, but I'm going to have the opportunity to take a pot shot. That's really going to change the player's behavior.
Now, what's the advantage for initiative here? Presumably, if you won initiative, that would be even better because you could be on Overwatch for longer.
You're on Overwatch the entire time. When you're on Overwatch, you can't move.
When you're on Overwatch, you may move. You may choose to move instead of making any attacks. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm undermining you here.
I think you are, yeah. 1 second. Let me see if I'm undermined. Yeah, I guess you're right. I think you're right. Yeah, that makes sense. So the thing is, it's not bad at all for losing initiative. It works really well with losing initiative. But technically, if you won with initiative, you'd have one more option, which is you could lock off the field, or you could say, okay, well, no one came in. I'm going to move off anyhow.
Well, somewhere that we are pretty sure that it's advantageous, or could be advantageous in specific circumstances, is the opportunity fire on the move sub rule, the advanced rule for the advanced rule, which is a particularly weird one. I suspect it doesn't see a lot of play, and it comes with a ton of warnings on it to be like very sure that you want to actually use this before you add it to your game. Essentially, what this one does is during your movement at any point, either at the beginning, in the middle, or the end of your movement process, you can declare that you're making a shot on the move, and you can fire one weapon in your forwards firing arc, well, in your regular non-torso twisted firing arc, with massive penalties. You can just take one pot shot while you run past, and I think it's not too hard to see why this means going first could be advantageous. You know, you might be able to sneak a shot in before another mech is able to run away. It's potentially, I don't know. It's a bit of a dodgy rule in my opinion. I'm not so sure about this one because there could be times where you can basically be like double tapping a mech.
Well, there's some mechs that this would be super good for, like the Pack Hunter, which I think is a 7-11-7 clan unit that has a single ER PPC that does 15 damage. And so the previous round before, you could jump, take a shot, and then in weapon attack phase. And then with the 7-11-7, you're pretty fast. So during movement phase, you can just, run, get line of sight for a split moment, take that shot, and go back into cover. So I think for like light units with a single big gun, this is very, very, very good. And once again, if you lose initiative, it allows you to set up certain opportunities that you wouldn't necessarily have previously. So it allows you to play a few more turns in advance, I say. Because if you lose initiative, you can make that pot shot. I actually think this is sort of similar to the previous opportunity fire one, where it's good if you lose or you win. Because if you win, then you can still wait to see what people do and move. But in certain situations, you could create traps so you move into someone's range where you can take a pot shot next round. And then if you lose initiative, you have the opportunity for the pot shot. But technically, if you won initiative, they could move and you'd still have the opportunity for the pot shot. It just might not be the opportunity you were looking for.
Do you want to know where it's really broken? This attack, like I said, it's got heavy penalties. +3 modifier on your one shot. That's really tough. And if the target has already moved, they have their movement bonus. But if they haven't moved, they don't have a movement modifier yet.
Ah, there you go. Yeah, that's it. And that's mean.
And so that, this really violates a lot of like BattleTech design common patterns. Is you could basically, by losing initiative, being forced to go first, you get a massive advantage potentially targeting units, especially like units that rely on their speed to avoid attacks, or rely on simply avoiding the enemies, spotting from a distance or something. If Nathan's pack hunter comes along and catches your little spotting spider in the open, Nathan could lose initiative and absolutely blast your spider with that PPC because you don't have any chance to counterplay. The only counterplay would have been not winning initiative.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, the target movement modifier, that's a really good use of it for sure.
And there's only sort of a few things that do that let you, act out of phase. Usually they come with a heavy cost. I'm thinking of the, combat intuition.
Mm-hmm.
I think the special pilot ability that lets you take a pilot hit and then you can fire before the movement phase. So, there's a huge cost for that. For this opportunity fire, I think that being able to just do this at any time, well, I don't want to say that it's, unplayable or anything, but it would certainly make the game very different.
Totally. There's a few advanced rules that we haven't played at our table, and this is one of them because we thought it would really fundamentally change how BattleTech works. But I've now become brave, and I want to start applying this on the table because I think that, it just adds another technical layer. And initially I didn't want to do it because I thought it would slow down the game too much, but I actually don't think it will slow down the game too much.
I mean, compared to how slow our games already are.
Exactly. Like, we take our time, man. We're savoring the experience. So, yeah, we'll just savor a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's move to some other sort of niche examples. And these are initiative cards. As referenced, Michael and I play with the initiative deck, which is the most balanced and fair way to play classic BattleTech.
Mm-hmm.
Quotation, Nathan Hunt, 2024.
Nathan 2024, yeah.
And some initiative cards are actually very advantageous when you lose initiative. And I'll just name them really quickly here. There's one called Intimidation Tactics, which is a Lord card. So it's very unlikely that you'll lose initiative with this card, but it is still possible because it's a Lord blue. So certain things can beat it. But basically, you demoralize units within 10 hexes of the unit that you declare this on, and units cannot end their movement phase within 10 hexes of the unit that used it. So essentially, you can move into range of a unit that has activated this at the beginning of your movement phase, and then it forces your opponent to try to get out of range. And 10 hexes is friggin' huge, right? And so if you move just a little bit closer, you can literally force the person to completely move, not off the map. I'm pretty sure we did some clarifications on this rule in the most recent initiative deck update, but it can force you to move to a poorly strategically decided position. Michael used this once on me to force my vulture to give him my back facing. It was the only legal move I could make, to run, to give my back, and then he blew me up, and that made me sad.
And I'll just say on the flip side, losing initiative can also sort of protect you from this in some way. If the opponent is going to push you, by losing initiative, you can move first somewhere valid, and then whatever movement they make can't affect you. Because your unit's already moved, it can't declare any more movements to be affected by the demoralizer or intimidation tactics.
Totally. And these initiative cards, most of them have to be activated before the movement phase. So because of that, you'll know it's coming. So if you lose, you can move away from it. If you don't have the card, and if you do have the card and you lose, you can really force some stupid shenanigans. And there's a few other cards that are like this called Press the Enemy, which are numerically 4 and 6. And essentially the selected unit gains +1 MP, and then enemy units which begin the turn within 3 hexes may not end their movement closer than that to this unit. So essentially, if there is a unit that is within 3 hexes, you activate this, you just get right up to their face. And dependent on the MP of the unit and the terrain, you can once again limit their options of where they can even move. So you might force them into the open, for example. That's pretty good. So exact same concept as intimidation tactics, just not nearly as good. And then there's charge, which has a numerical value of 8. And charge is if the selected unit moves towards an enemy, it may move 1 additional hex toward that enemy for free, regardless of MP cost. And this is, this is almost similar to opportunity fire in terms of maybe it's not good, maybe it's just equal. But the reason I like this is if you have this card in your hand and you lose initiative and you want to really reach an objective in the distance, you can use people as a base to charge, to move forward more effectively. And if you are moving first, you have that option. People can't essentially move their units in a different way to prevent you from moving where you want to go. If you lose initiative, you choose where you're going based on the previous round. And because you can hold these cards, you could hold it and activate it at the right moment. Yeah, I think that's an interesting option. But these are all associated with and sort of interlinked and have a relationship with piloting skills, Michael. And I know that you identified some piloting skills that also it's good if you lose initiative on.
Yeah, in some ways, the special pilot abilities are almost like the template that a lot of these initiative cards are based on. So if anything, they're even more powerful if it's something that you can trigger yourself. And, at least with the initiative cards, maybe it pops up. Honestly, most of the time, intimidation tactics hasn't been that impactful. But, there have been a couple times where intimidation tactics came at just the right moment and completely gutted someone else's strategy. If you have that as a special pilot ability, I think that's even more of a thing. It is something you can plan around and develop tactics with. So Demoralizer is basically the at-will version of intimidation tactics, where you can target a mech, force it to not be able to move any closer to you. And so then if you are using that, then if you get to move first, you can control where the other person gets to move. By losing initiative, you gain that little advantage over the person. You can force them that they can't go into the obvious cover anymore. They have to retreat away into the open. Even if they didn't make a mistake in their movement last turn, by losing initiative, you gain an advantage over them. And same thing, there's Antagonizer, where you force a particular enemy unit to only attack this mech. And not only can they only attack this mech, they also have to move towards this mech as fast as they can. So if you use that on an enemy and Nathan's like, oh man, now I'm antagonized by your little spider. But then I lose initiative. So my spider jumps way over there into that forest, past the rushing river, the magma fields, the giant swarms of mech-eating locusts, and Nathan's mech has nothing to do but charge through those things. And that's only possible because I lost initiative. If I won initiative, Nathan could have moved that unit first, bypassed all of the locusts and the magma field and the rushing river, but I lost. So I win.
Like the craziness, like forcing someone to have to enter water, for example. Like the lava. I want to see a situation in which someone's forced to navigate through water into lava and then through a bug storm. That's a hellscape of a map. If the person made it out of the water, first it's amazing that they're that good a pilot, and they're making it through. It's crazy. But no, I agree. Like you can just force people to do the craziest stuff, and movement. Like, once again, why the Vibro Mine strategy is so good is because it weaponizes the movement phase.
Mm-hmm.
To me, BattleTech is all about movement. Movement's the that's what the game's about. It's about movement. But movement, we always really separate. We always look at this is really a tactical thing. Whereas with these cards, it really becomes more an offensive thing. It becomes like a if the movement is the anvil that
Mhm.
you pound your hammer on, using these techniques is taking the anvil and slamming it on your opponent's head. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah, it's crazy.
And I don't want to speak for you, but a lot of times all these things they feel almost a little bit unfair. Like you said, we sort of view the movement phase as where the tactics are set up, and then the dice that you roll during the weapons phase, that's where the fighting happens. So then when you know, someone can lose initiative, but that's an advantage to them because they can force you to do
Yeah.
something really stupid,
Yeah,
and there
yeah.
was nothing you could do about it. Like, which I guess is not that much different than, taking a random crit headshot, but you don't expect the initiative to be that. If you won initiative, you expect to win.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. Maybe I invested in it. Maybe I've got, friggin' tactical computers and human there's a special pilot ability for commanding. You got a command mech with a super special command guy in it.
Yeah.
I should be responding to you tactically, but this is like a tactic almost outside of the tactics layer of the game.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I do I like how there are elements in the game like this that turn things on its head, but
Mhm.
if you ever get hit by intimidation tactics or demoralizer, you always feel screwed. I've never
Mhm.
not felt screwed when I got hit by it, and I didn't not like it because I sort of like getting screwed over in BattleTech because hey, that's BattleTech. But
Mhm.
definitely it really turns things on its head.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the initiative roll is supposed to sort of abstractly represent the tactics and coordination of your lance. So going last is the advantage that you get, the mechanical advantage for sort of lore. Your people are smart and being responsive to what the enemy is doing. So because of that, you get to go last. Whereas this doesn't really have any explanation. It doesn't key into the lore. It's like a meta tactic. There's no reason why being smarter has made your people bad at not charging into the open or exposing their backs. It doesn't fit. It feels gamey every time it happens.
Yeah. If we look at all these things holistically, so really we have instances in which losing initiative is strategically better, like small
Hmm.
instances. We have instances in which it's better for specific weapons. We have instances in which it works better with specific advanced rules. And we have instances in which it works better with special case rules like the initiative cards or the pilot abilities.
Hmm.
It's a pretty big breadth of opportunities where the game turns the initiative system on its head a little bit, which I like. And I'm sure there's more. This is just our experiences on the table. And actually, let me tell you one really weird one too. This is crazy because this actually didn't happen to me in the game, but the person who used the Vibro Mines on me used this on another opponent. And I thought this was really crazy. Okay, so he lost initiative, right?
Hmm.
He moved first. His opponent moved and declared a charge attack. Okay.
Hmm.
And the opponent was a better pilot on him. So he charges in. He's going to hit this guy in the physical attack phase. So what does he decide to do? He vibro mines where his unit is standing. So all of a sudden there's 80 vibro mines on the place where he's standing. Then the
Okay.
physical attack phase, it's already initiated. The guy hits, the spider hits or whatever the unit was,
Yeah.
pushes him out, moves into that hex. And then the mines blow up, legging the unit. That's another wow, what a weird little thing. And that's how it works. Those are the rules. We check them and we're pretty dang confident. Never 100% confident. Never 100%, but pretty confident. So cool stuff like that. That's so neat. I'd love to hear more examples that the community's heard about. And we'll totally, if you email us or send us a message, I'll make sure to share them in next episode's Extraordinary Proclamation segment, because I just want to know more opportunities like this. Because you know what? We all have those games where we're constantly losing initiative. Constantly, maybe just by 1, maybe just by 2, and those games can sometimes feel hopeless. And we get into the mentality where it's like, well, I need to win initiative to win the game. And little things like this, I think, just help change the perspective and maybe give a little bit of hope, even if it's false. But hope, man. What's the line from Andor? Rebellions are won on hope. There you go. That's a Star Wars quote. Yeah, I know it's not a Star Wars podcast. Rebellions are won on hope. BattleTech is won on hope.
Are there many examples
of
rebellions that succeed in the BattleTech universe? I don't think rebellions are a big thing.
The Inner Sphere rebellion against the clan invasion. The rightful clan occupation, them retaking their land. That rebellion.
Okay, fair enough. All right.
The biggest rebellion of them all. Those treacherous Inner Sphere fools. Cool. Well, this has been great, everybody. I think that's all we have. But make sure to send us a message if you have other examples of losing initiative being advantageous to you. I'd love to share them. I find it to be just such an interesting concept, and I would love to encounter your unique scenario and situations in my mental battlefield. Anything to say before we move on to the next segment, Michael?
Nope.
On to the next segment.
This is Professor Michael presenting The Sphere We Live In. The kodamas of Isesaki 1 are small, six-legged marsupials that live and graze in the lush forests of their homeworld. Forming tight family bonds, 2 or 3 of the pale-furred climbers will stake claim over a tree, subsisting off its leaves and the grasses underneath. But they aren't alone. Thousands of kodamas in nearby trees will be part of a single enclave, sharing territory and a distinct set of calls at a scale seen nowhere else. In local towns and villages, they're allowed to roam freely, often disrupting traffic or destroying gardens. But is it because the locals revere and respect them? Or is it fear? Kodamas are one of the most deadly mammals in all the sphere. Their unique defense, sheer numbers. When hurt or threatened, the kodama lets out a cry. Pack members will respond immediately and violently. The calls will attract more and more of these fuzzy terrors, and soon hundreds of kodamas will descend on the threat, biting and clawing until it is eliminated. How dangerous are they? Just ask the citizens of the town of Gina. Except you can't, because they're all dead. 2,000 casualties caused by one stray kick. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Tertiary Objective Battlefield Outcome Report segment. Initiating.
This is Nathaniel Smithson with INN Boots on the Ground, sharing an after-battle report of a recent conflict between the clans and the Inner Sphere in an unknown location in the periphery. Although details regarding the full outcome of the battle remain unclear, as can be seen from the grainy footage we've managed to recover, a unique battlefield strategy results in the legs of the clanner unit being quickly torn to shreds by specialized armaments delivered to the location only moments before their detonation. Let me slow down that recording for you. And right there, an astute viewer like you surely sees it too. Just before the explosion in the distance, we see a wraith landing nearby at the exact moment of the detonation, seemingly triggering the armaments, leaving the clanner absolutely no time to react. This unique Inner Sphere strategy is another example of the superior tactics of our great people. After the break, we'll sit down with famed Inner Sphere historian Professor Michael and take a look at the advancement of Inner Sphere strategy across the centuries of warfare.
So, what happened? In the recent Alberta Classic hosted by the Calgary BattleTech League, Derek Captain Shoedice von Kessel brought to the table a unique strategy relying on Vibro Mines to bring about victory. Let's break it down. As mentioned earlier, Vibro Mines are a missile-based munition that deploys mines on hexes specifically designed to detonate when mechs of certain weight thresholds enter or get near that hex. When Vibro Mines land in a hex with a mech in it, they don't detonate in that hex until that mech has left that hex. But for every 10 tons in which a mech is above the weight of the set threshold, the mines will be triggered from one hex away from where they are placed. For example, if they are set at a 20-ton threshold, a 40-ton mech would blow up the mines 2 hexes away from the hex the mines are placed when moving around them. In this scenario referenced, the player shot Vibro Mines in the hex of targets during weapon attack phase and set the weight threshold at a low enough weight that they could be triggered from a distance by one of their jumping units, a Wraith. And then, in the next round's movement phase, would move that Wraith to a nearby hex that would be close enough to trigger the mine. This functionally weaponized the movement phase, as the damage takes effect immediately as the mines are triggered, and there is no roll for them to hit. If they blow up, the legs take damage. This strategy resulted in a truly inescapable situation based on initiative. The mines landed weapon phase, they could be triggered in the next movement phase before the opponent moved. Legit, this is a unique and cool BattleTech strategy.
This is Professor Michael presenting The Sphere We Live In. For big game fishers across the sphere, few quarries can compare to the majesty and challenge of the Hodson's Flyer. Originally native to New Olympia, it has since been introduced to hundreds of saltwater seas across dozens of worlds. 4 meters long and weighing more than 1 ton, the Flyer is larger than most ironfin, but that is not the source of their allure. When startled, or simply playing, its powerful muscles and XL metabolism allow it to reach speeds of 80 knots, faster than an Arctic cheetah light mech. Once at speed, the Flyer extends its 4 lateral fins and leaps from the water. Soaring almost 10 meters into the air, these agile behemoths are captivating. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Secondary objective, rule check discovery segment. Initiating.
Welcome back everybody to our rule check discovery segment. Today I'm here to discuss a rule that probably I only have made in the entire world. And that's okay. That's okay. That's okay, right? Right? Is that okay, Michael?
I mean, there is precedence. We've had lots of rules that people have come on and been like, really? So that was my reaction when you sort of described this one to me, and I was like, really?
So this is a rule mistake that I was making for a long time. And when I found out I was making it, I'm like, what a fool I am. It is so obvious that I made this rule mistake.
Yeah, were you making this when you were a literal child?
Exactly. It's one of the legendary child rule mistakes. But then when I was looking up the rules to clarify, to help explain why this is a rule mistake, I'm like, wow, actually, I'm right. This isn't a rule mistake. This is a keyword issue in BattleTech. So I'm vindicated.
Listeners, I need you to back me up, and I need you to explain why he's not right. He can't be right.
I am right. Let's talk about it. Okay, here's the rule mistake I was making. Side torso destruction not counting as engine hits. So let's say you have an XL engine, you have 2 engine slots on each side, and your side torso's blown off. I used to not count those destroyed engine components as engine hits. Basically, it was just a wash, so that unit could still survive longer. Like, people with XL engines or XSL engines, it didn't really make them that much weaker. It's like the concept of zombie mech did not exist in my universe. It was just like, everyone's a zombie mech. Everyone can survive forever.
And so like physically, how did you think this worked? Like there's a whole third of the engine in a chunk of the mech, and that chunk just gets riddled with holes and falls off. Why? What? Where would that? How does the engine keep going?
To me, I always visualize an XL engine or XXL engine or whatever it is. The bigger engines, all they equated to was better technology, more redundancy. So those extra slots, all they are is more redundancy. Like, so sure, it's bigger, but that means, it can take more hits. It can or maybe it can't take more hits. It can still only take 3 hits, but it doesn't matter. If it can just fall out. Oh yeah, you have those other components on the other side. It's redundant.
The engine sticks out into the hull and it can be shot. But if that chunk of the hull falls off, the engine's still attached.
I thought it was compartmentalized, it ejects, and the mech's rerouting engine power to center torso.
But if it got shot, then, it might cause damage before it could be rerouted away from the redundant system.
Exactly. That's 100% it, right? It's like almost case. Case, ammo explosion is contained, ejected. Same thing. Side torso is destroyed. Engine powers transferred internally, ejected. Okay, so that's the rule mistake I was making. Okay, this is clearly a rule mistake because no one plays this way. But let's look at the actual rules, because by the actual rules, I'm going to argue that this is not a rule mistake. So if we go to the Battle Mech Manual, I have page numbers, people. Okay, so first, let's look at what happens if a location is destroyed. If a location is destroyed, all components in that location are also destroyed, including all armor. That's page 43 of the Battle Mech Manual. Okay, makes sense. Side torso is destroyed. Everything in there is destroyed. Okay, let's go to Mech Engine on page 49 of the Battle Mech Manual. Mech engines have 3 points of shielding. Each critical hit to an engine slot destroys 1 point of shielding. Okay, so it requires a critical hit to an engine slot to destroy that engine slot. Next, let's go to what happens if locations are destroyed. Page 47, BMM. If a location is destroyed, rather than just damaged, no check for critical hits in that location is made unless it contains 1 or more explosive slots. So the disconnect is that something being destroyed is not the equivalent of taking an engine hit. An engine hit requires a critical hit by the rules, and when a section is destroyed, it does not take critical hits unless there is ammo in there, and that's a potential critical hit. So basically, what I'm saying is, I'm right, and creators of BattleTech, write me an apology letter, and let's change the entire universe and make everyone zombie mechs, and this is so cool that I'm such a genius BattleTech player and vindicated. So it wasn't a mistake. So take that, world. Take that.
And this is where I implore you, listeners, please help explain where the flaw is. I've listened to the argument, but it can't be right. It's come on. The engine blows up. Engine explodey. This kills the engine.
Yeah, I can really empathize. I can feel empathy for your argument, but that's not what the rules say. So everybody, sorry, we got to change how we play BattleTech fundamentally. So there's really no downside to an XXL engine anymore, or any of those engines. Take them whenever you want to, and just know that you only got to worry about critical hits. Your side torsos both blown off. You are fine. You were fine. So anyhow, obviously, this is not how it's played. It is just a keyword difference, and it's even on the record sheet. Because even on the record sheet, it says engine hit, right? It doesn't say engine destroyed when you're knocking it off. And once again, engines can only be hit through critical hits. So it's just a little keyword differentiation that I think in the olden days, this is what caused me to make that rule mistake. Actually, Michael, I think it's in our games when we started playing together, that's when I realized this was wrong. Because you're like, no, everything in there is destroyed. And I was like, destroyed? Oh, that's crazy. Wow, these mechs are so vulnerable. Why am I piloting these mechs? I just want to pilot a Banshee, a base Banshee from now on. So yeah, that changed things a lot. So it's definitely not intended to do what I'm saying, but I do think because of how the rules are referenced, it actually is a little loophole in the rules just because some slight keyword differences. Like on the record sheet, if it said something like engine destroyed, or even if it said, if in the side torso section of the book, it says all components in, the side torso are destroyed. If an engine exists in the side torso, each engine slot takes a critical hit. That alone would totally cover all the bases. But unfortunately, it doesn't. And because, I follow the rules as written, unless I'm remembering them wrong, gotta go with that.
Bungle Co. is not responsible if any listeners show up at their local leagues, point to the rule book, and play back a little tape recorder recording of your explanation, Nathan, and then get made fun of and, I don't know, thrown out comically through the window of the friendly local game store.
If you do get made fun of, though, you can send us an email and I will send you an email back saying, I'm really sorry that you have been victimized for maintaining the right view. And I will feel, once again, empathy towards you, because BattleTech is not about destruction. It is about empathy, as taught to us once again by our queen, Catherine Steiner. The biggest beacon of love and light the BattleTech universe has ever known. Anyhow, that is our rule mistake today. On to the next segment.
Tertiary objective. Stories of the Inner Sphere segment. Initiating.
Redstone City Dropport. Bone Norman. Trellshire, Lyran Commonwealth. 14 June, 3046. The sun crested the craggy Badlands in the distance, its friendly yellow light bursting from rocky chains and cascading down twisted slopes into a bright flood of rejoicing that the night had been banished once more. Precentor Vincent DuPont stood tall in his white uniform, ignoring his small pot belly that he never quite managed to vanquish. He breathed in the fresh but alien scents with a chest-expanding effort, the wafts from the deep deserts already bringing rising heat and grit, and then let it out explosively, chuckling. Reading too much ancient literature again? You could almost hear Chandra's voice chiding, despite the more than 450 light years that separated him from their home on Terra. I've traveled to over 100 star systems, and yet that Terran-like light. Visions of pale blue eyes twinkling as she worked her garden sparked, beauty within beauty. A thump undulated through the ground, nearly vibrating his teeth, as the 75-ton Black Knight trod heavily across the Dropport tarmac and began walking up the ramp of the towering ball of metal that was a Union-class dropship. The 13.5-meter-tall mech strode inside the cargo door as though it was a human stepping inside a large mobile building. Statistics of the dropship surged forward. Introduced in 2708, 81.5 meters in diameter and standing 78 meters tall, massing 3,600 tons, fuel, burn days, safe thrust. The numbers ran as a subroutine in the back of his mind, the result of a lifetime of study and dedication. After all, the Nox was one of his ships. In fact, he should already be at the Natter jump point of the Bone Norman system, as all 3 vessels of this Explorer Corps expedition were under his command. Especially as the Golden Hind, a Buccaneer-class dropship, had already lifted off and begun its multi-day burn toward their jump ship several hours ago. But he always preferred to be the last man off soil of a launching point for any expedition. The peace of Blake be with you, a soft voice interrupted. Vincent clenched his teeth absently running fingers through his still thick, shoulder-length white hair as he turned. He took a moment to calm his nerves as he looked past the interloper to the Herculean rock jutting out of the ground beyond the tarmac. With Redstone City desperately clinging to its side as though the outcropping would protect it from the ravages of the harsh deserts beyond, or the predations of pirates from the periphery. After all, the Bone Norman system sat at the edge of the inner sphere, the border at which the powers of the Archon of the Lyran Commonwealth could still claim fealty and offer protection. Mostly. Beyond lay chaos, danger, and death. What's more, despite his crew including some of the finest Comstar technicians available and triple the standard repair parts, they'd be traveling through dozens of uninhabited systems for what could be years. If their Kearney Fuchida hyperspace drive failed, they'd be stranded forever, facing starvation and eventual death. And yet it's where we're going to find what's out there. That excitement ameliorated harsher thoughts as his eyes found hers. Such blackness within the diminutive woman standing in front of him in a similar, crisp white uniform. "Precentor Bradford," he said, his tone as it should be, calm, respectful. "Are you ready to find Primus Sim's visions of our destruction?" she asked. Vincent had ignored the talk of visions from a delusional Primus that had plagued Comstar for nearly a century. The pseudo-religious overtones of Comstar went hand in hand with such superstition, of course, but still, "We are scientists." She seemed almost amused by his silence. "Though how could you read anything in such a cold face?" "I'm surprised you didn't leave on the hind," she continued, inflection still as flat as the planed tarmac. Her dirty brown, short-cropped hair waved in the growing strength of the wind, while her small mouth and dark, beady eyes remained thin and stretched. "I bet she's never smiled." Pale blues sparkled. "Or seen beauty." "This is the first time we've directly served together, Commander," he finally said. "But I'm always the last man of my command off soil." She canted her head, as though inspecting something strange and unusual, though her cold, freckled face revealed nothing. "The Blessed Blake embraced liturgy for Comstar. I am pleased to see you embrace that further in every aspect of your life." He couldn't respond for a moment, taken aback at her misreading of the situation, much less the lecturing tone. "Just tradition, lass, just tradition." But though he nearly said that out loud, he managed to keep his usual grousing behind sealed lips. "You've never been pleased at anything in your life." He'd never met one of her kind that had. "After you, Precentor," he finally said, sweeping his hands toward the waiting dropship. She inclined her head slightly, as though taking her due, and walked past with steady strides. There were no markings on her uniform that set her apart from himself in any way, beyond the fact that while he commanded the ships, she held mission command authority. But he knew the look, the smooth, danger-filled walk, the head always moving to catch every angle, and that fanaticism buried, almost, behind calculating black eyes. Decades in the service and he knew the look of a ROM agent by now. The internal and external security force of his order that had made entire great houses dance to their tune. "And I'm heading out into the unknown, with one perched on my shoulders. Blake's blood. Chandra, what have I gotten myself into?" He finally followed, last man off soil, as always. X235-A2, unknown system, deep periphery, 30 November, 3046. Precentor Arabella Bradford watched the holovid tank at the center of the merchant-class jumpship command bridge. Despite the recent emergence back into real time from the 27.9 light-year space folding jump, the blinking lights across consoles demanding procedural attention were ignored. Instead, the bridge's entire crew, both the circle of technicians spread around her horizontally, and those inverted above her head at mirrored stations, gaped at the hull display spinning in all its glory in their midst. Blake's blood. Presenter DuPont breathed into the silence of the deck bridge. That would explain why the calculations took so long to finalize for our jump. She wasn't a scientist, though such things were intriguing. But even she couldn't tear her gaze away to see if the reverence in the man's voice was for the use of that sacred name. He wasn't a bad commander. The recent months let her know he was extremely capable. But he lacked appropriate decorum, dedication. I'll speak with him again later. In the meantime, they all feasted on the visual before them. A minuscule sense of blackness surrounded by an accretion disk of intensely bright light, spiraling at different speeds, filled the hull of it. The twin stars of this system trailed long tails of light that spun off their coronas, spiraling into that disk. Despite the fact that this was only a holographic representation of what existed over a dozen AU below their position in real space, it was bright enough to hurt the eyes, causing them to squint, almost as though even the display couldn't craft a visualization of reality that wouldn't damage human vision. The computer spat out spatial coordinates, distances, masses, and velocities. She took them in, but could barely keep up with the details. She cocked her head. Fascinating. Sir, were the calculations correct? The ship's XO asked. Arabella frowned as she looked at the woman. A shaking voice is unbecoming for someone in command. Jackson? Presenter DuPont said. Jackson, he said again, voice filled with command. The overweight man shook his head before responding. Sorry, sir. She watched him impassively as his fingers flew across the keyboard. Yeah, no gravity stresses outside of parameters. Our distance is safe, but probably 2 weeks to recharge, if we're lucky. She narrowed her eyes as the man's eyes stole back to the hull of it. It was like nothing they'd ever seen before, true, but duty was duty. Another one to watch. Hot damn! Presenter DuPont yelled, slapping his hand on the command chair that floated in the microgravity. The sounds echoing and bouncing and mingling with humming monitors and exhaled breaths from a dozen bodies. Will I ever become used to such exuberance? But the tension eased from the bridge in postures loosed, vanishing frowns, and unclenched fists. Not many men could do that with 2 words. He could be of much use. Now that's a sight I'd never thought I'd see. Vincent continued, excitement lining every word. A micro-black hole. Well, no planetary run here, people. But we've got 2 weeks to suck up every bit of data we can on this astronomical event. That's why we're here. Unnamed Cargo Station. Kinbrace. Deep Periphery. 9 April 3047. Vincent fumed as the ROM agent continued the negotiations. We're grateful for any information you have concerning other denizens of the Deep Periphery, Presenter Bradford said. She faced partially away from Vincent, her shoulder-length hair veiling her face. Across the table from this strange woman wearing bright, unusual-looking clothing, and bearing a sigil on her breast, uniform, of an old, tall ship silhouette against a red-orange sea and setting sun. He didn't recognize it at all. Comstar is well aware of the Hanseatic League, Arabella continued, and the powerful mercantile empire your ruling council has carved out of these barren stars. You are to be commended. Some of Comstar knew about this league? He stretched his neck, feeling the tension all the way to his toes. Looking away from the rather ramshackle table, fingers unconsciously scratching several days' growth on his chin. Finding a more ramshackle room, half filled with traders from a dozen worlds, in a ramshackle building that was an overgrown shed, become trading house. In the middle of a large, hard-beaten gravel flat region, perhaps a kilometer on its side, that operated as a central cargo station and clearinghouse for trading between various systems in this sector of the deep periphery. Just enough room to allow 2 dropships at a time. They'd been warned off trying to bring more than one. To keep the peace, they said. Huh. And we be most aware of the adepts of the Comstar, the local replied, head inclining as though in respect. Despite the thick accent and odd phrasing, they readily understood one another. Because we've been dealing with them. The 30-world empire, half 1,000 light years out, where there should be nothing but hard-scrabble serfs and degenerate tyrants lording over a few broken-down battle mechs, and he'd been told nothing of it. What am I the commander of if they keep this from me? He'd always struggled with the pervasive secrecy of Comstar, gently finding it got in the way of progress. But he put up with it because they let him explore the stars. But this was crazy. It's our mission to find what's out there. And come to find out, other teams already knew whole swaths of this cold sector of the deep periphery. Ignored pale blue tisking eyes as he ground his teeth in frustration. The other woman delicately set a computer storage cube upon the table. This be our current understanding of systems, she continued, pulling his attention back to the table. Her gray eyes were flat and determined. For merely 100 light years from this point. Vincent's eyebrows nearly climbed up to his graying hairline. If that were true, it would be invaluable knowledge to add to their database. Provided we don't already have it. He closed his eyes, noting the bitterness. He refused to accept that in his command. If true, it would mean they could turn in a whole new direction. He opened his eyes, perhaps where previous crews have not already explored. I have access to considerable funds. A gift can be arranged for your August ruling council. Presenter Bradford responded, the cool confidence in her voice easily the match of this expert trader. The woman raised a hand and waggled her finger in a strange pattern. We care not for your Comstar weights. It be no value here amongst star systems. We have long-term trade agreements with other periphery entities. We could. The woman waggled her finger once more. Ours be better. Presenter Bradford slowly canted her head. Those were never going to work, and you knew it. You placed them first to let her believe she had the better bargaining power. What are you going to give her that she cannot resist? I have a Star League-era Sentinel battle mech. It will be yours, she said softly. For the first time in the hours-long meeting, Vincent watched emotion flicker in the woman's eyes. And the hook is set. She's good, but Arabella's better. It took him a moment to realize he thought of her by her first name. 10 minutes later, they strode across the gravel towards the Knox, ignoring the curious stares from the gaggle of people surging through the trading area. Presenter Bradford cradled the cube in the crook of her arm. All ramshackle. I assume you want me to switch out the Sentinel's advanced weaponry for lower tech substitutes, he said. Got a good look at their mech guard? They won't know the difference. Their lost tech is not as bad as some, but bad. Already done. Ha! Just like that, the trick Primus Mori pulled against the entire Draconis Combine before the War of 3039. I guess if it works well, keep using it. He vacillated between respect that she'd come into this negotiation so well prepared, and anger that she'd given orders to his crewmen without informing him. How could she sound as though she spent her usual 10 minutes lecturing of geopolitics and subterfuge in just 2 words? Another more disturbing thought blossomed. Do I need to start doubting my own crew? You could have told me about the Hanseatic League, he continued, pushing away such thoughts. Have we traveled anywhere we didn't know already? We've tagged numerous systems not in any Comstar databank, Presenter, she responded. Our mission is still very much a success, and will continue to be one. He gritted his teeth, trying to keep his voice level, realizing in all the long months of their voyage so far, he'd never once heard a deviance in her pitch. Stupid inhuman rom. And why wasn't I told? He asked one last time as they neared the ramp of their dropship, and he swung his fist in the air to let the crew know to start preparations for liftoff. She gave him one of her extra inscrutable looks and marched onto the ramp first, as he waited to be the last off soil. Right. Need to know. Always need to know. X558-B3, unknown system, deep periphery, 27 October 3047. Death unto you! You were denied my domain! The words were screamed at Arabella above the sounds of weapons fire as the nearly frothing little man fell back, his guards trying to protect the dictator. She calmly backed away, ignoring the wet, cold mist settling everywhere. A pistol she kept secreted away now in hand as the negotiations collapsed into anarchy. Something large moved in the heavy jungle that covered whole swaths of this planet before a huge tree shuddered and fell, revealing a lumbering battle mech. It was covered in moss and vines, gaping holes where armor plating had long ago been torn away, and one of the arms hung limp, myomer muscle showing through more holes. Arabella was an expert in a wide field of studies, including every known battle mech design ever fielded. And the horrible, dilapidated state of the beast caused long seconds to pass, in which time it raised its right arm and directed a particle projectile blast against their dropship 300 meters behind them. The azure beams lashed out, leaving after images momentarily burned onto retinas, but swept wide of the mark. Small arms weapon fire continued between the crewmen she'd adopted as guards and the disheveled members of the tyrant's court. She snorted at the ridiculousness. Another world they'd found, not even here long enough to discover what they called this system. Populated by a few thousand souls, lorded over by a trumped-up king with access to a single ancient battle mech that gave him unassailable power. Gladiator. As the smell of ozone wafted through the clearing and the bright flash of pistol laser fire lit the heavy undergrowth around their positions, she finally dug up the reference. One of the very first battle mechs ever built, 500 years ago. How long have these people been out here?
Presenter Bradford?
Presenter DuPont's voice spoke in her earcom.
Do you wish us to return fire? I'm fearful of civilian casualties.
She was far enough away the odds of small arms fire striking her were now minimal, and if that mech managed to actually hit their position, she'd resign her commission. Still, if there were real trouble, the man should be willing to make sacrifices. They may be scientists, but they are still Comstar. I will need to increase my efforts to strengthen his dedication. A large explosion behind caused her guards to jump, but she looked over her shoulder without breaking stride. The Gladiator had attempted to fire its PPC once more, but obviously the capacitors had finally failed after such terrible centuries of maintenance. And the entire gun, and most of the arm, had blown off. The mech listing and already falling to slam through the heavy trees toward the verdant ground. As you can see, Presenter, there is no need. We should prepare for liftoff. She could see her guards eye her with incredulity that she'd never ducked nor broken stride. She eased her pistol back into its hidden holster. I'll need to continue my work with them as well.
X936-E7. Unknown System. Deep Periphery. 1 May 3048.
The Primus promulgated the Blessed Blake's mandate of returning balance within the inner sphere and attempting to keep high technologies from the hands of the great houses that would only use it for more death and war. The audacity of the Dragon, combined with the Primus's foresight in gifting Theodore Kurita battle mechs, kept the Federated Commonwealth from crushing House Kurita during the War of 3039.
After close to 2 years of Arabella's droning instructions, as though endless lecturing would increase his crew's dedication, although it had for some, who now followed her around like sheep, he'd learned the trick of seeming attentive while completely ignoring her words. Vincent watched the holo display absently scratching his full beard. The stupid thing was annoying, but somehow he found himself trapped in a self-imposed contest. If she's going to grow her stupid hair into a giant braid, I'll match her, at least in this. He tried ignoring that last thought. It grew harder and harder.
But mark my words, she droned. There will need to be future rebalancing. House Davion and Steiner simply grow too powerful and must be kept in check.
He nodded, absently, grunting as though in agreement. He tried having a conversation once, bringing up that reading between the lines of the Order's records seemed to imply that it was Toyama, Blake's successor, that had radicalized Comstar and forged them on a path of keeping the inner sphere in line. But before he'd finished his first sentence, the dark gleam in her eye let him know he'd walked too close to a line that could be very dangerous for any Comstar personnel. He'd paid for that for months, as he'd eased her most of the way off his back. But he knew she'd never forget or forgive his apparent lapse of faith.
Presenter?
A voice broke across the comm, blessedly silencing Arabella.
We're approaching the commander's bunk.
Vincent stared avidly at the display, a video feed of a camera mounted on the lead Marine commanding the expedition on the derelict jump ship they discovered upon entering the system. Proceed, Adept Vess, Vincent responded. As they approached, he could just see the outline, long faded, on the hatch of a star system with 9 planets. Long whistle from Jackson echoed on the bridge. Darren Hegemony. My head, 1,000 years old. I had no idea they'd sent any explorations out this far.
Presenter?
Technician Jula broke in on another line.
We believe the KF drive blew a helium seal, which is likely what stranded them.
Confirmed, Adept, he responded. They watched as the door opened to the commander's billet, and they found what they expected after so many others. A desiccated, frozen human body with a hole drilled through the forehead. The crew had killed themselves in place of starving, as there was no planet in the system that could support any type of life. He shuddered. This exploration, despite the haranguing of Arabella, had been the highlight of his career, but he couldn't help thinking of a familiar pair of pale blue eyes. I hope this isn't my end. I have to get back to my Chandra. X104-C6, Unnamed System, Deep Periphery, 27 September 3048. Blake's blood! Presenter DuPont said, voice almost lost in the proximity alert klaxons blaring the length of the jump ship. Bile rose in the back of his throat, and the fear on the bridge slicked his skin. Less than half an hour since they'd arrived into this unnamed system, and a wing of aerospace fighters were streaking toward them. In their 2 years of explorations, they'd only once before run into an aerospace fighter, a craft venting air and fuel as it barely clawed its way into the upper atmosphere in a vain attempt to stop their insertion trajectory. But 10 fighters? Already at the jump point? He tapped the console again, bringing up a close-up of one of the fighters, gleaming with white, strange, unknown markings. More crazy,
The computer tried to take the design and kept flipping between a Stingray and Spad, but the strange craft wasn't either.
Recenter?
A trembling voice broke his concentration. He glanced at Jackson.
We've got a jump ship our sensors didn't initially pick up. What? Show me.
The deep-range scan brought up a fair display, despite the distance involved. As he watched, a dropship slowly disengaged and began a high-speed burn toward them. The 2 flights of aerospace fighters unleashed a fusillade of laser fire in a tight formation that flashed mere meters in front of the bridge of the jump ship. Then, they flashed past. He watched them effortlessly flip end over and begin a burn to slow down and begin another pass. "You have to deploy our fighters," Arabella said, voice cold and utterly controlled, as it always was.
Are you insane?
He said. He closed his eyes momentarily, knowing he'd pay for that. What? Somehow her face seemed even colder. Vincent stabbed his fingers at the hull display as the computer also failed to take the jump ship.
Those are fighters we cannot designate, and that's a jump ship we do not know.
For once, she didn't seem to catch his meaning. The bile rose further, and the full import of the moment crashed around him, the klaxon still bellowing its warning of danger into their ears.
We are the guardians of Star League technology, and yet even we have lost so many advances as the centuries of warfare have ground the universe down. But here, 1,300 light years from the edge of the inner sphere, we suddenly find a star vessel that appears brand new, that we've never seen before?
She slowly cocked her head. She got it. He glanced back at those strange markings and the evidence of high technology where there should be none. The superstitious premonition danced across his skin until the hair on his arms was standing upright.
Could it be?
He shook his head at such silliness, cleared his throat to keep it firm.
All hands, prepare to be boarded.
Unnamed dropship, Deep Periphery, 29 September, 3048. Blood streamed out of Arabella's mouth, down her chin, and splattered across her naked breast and stomach as she swam back up out of haze of interrogation drugs and spit out a tooth. The copper tang reminded her of training from years ago, while the lacerations and bruises across her skin screamed for attention. She ignored it all, standing up straighter to alleviate aching muscles, holding tight to the strips of nylon that bound her arms above her head in the small cell. Is that all you can summon? She was trying to get them to talk, to dig out their secrets. She remembered voices in the depths of the drugs, but nothing since. The vibration through her feet let her know they were under thrust. On a dropship then, likely heading to the planet with their captives. The monster in front of her nodded, as though in respect. It, was the only person she'd seen since the shocking boarding, with giant armored infantry tearing their way through the hatch. She'd spent a lifetime mastering any fear and dedicating herself to the cause of Comstar power. But as those mechanical beasts entered the bridge, the first wash of fear in long years weakened her resolve. And now this creature, certainly man-shaped, but easily 2.3 meters and probably 175 kilograms. You could make 4 of me out of it. Is it even human? Another woman entered, shaven head, single suit, only that strange dagger star insignia on the collar. The beast nodded to the newcomer, obviously ready to use Arabella's body as a punching bag again, if directed. The Khan wishes to know how you resisted the drugs so well. The eyes and tone demanded instant obedience. The high technology evident in the ship, the strange ranks and images, the leaping cat she saw on the bulkheads as she managed to sneak looks from behind her blindfold. It all spoke of power. Immense power. What have we discovered? Visions come to life? Won't talk. Not yet. Power only respects power. But then, we'll see. The woman cocked her head, almost as a mirror of Arabella's own mannerism. No, I can see you are not broken yet. That same respectful nod, as though it was worthy to stand up to such pain. My Loremasters never respected me for my strength. They only demanded it. Arabella gritted her teeth as the shadow of the beast fell across her once more. Unnamed dropship, deep periphery, 30 September, 3048. It shouldn't take this long. Is the numbness spreading faster? Please, work faster. Vincent floated in horror. He remembered the endless truths and secrets of Comstar and the great houses spilled from his lips. He talked for hours after they had beaten and then drugged him. He could still smell the vomit caked in his beard as he floated further away. I'm sorry, my Chandra. I betrayed my oaths. Others think I take them lightly, but you know, my Chandra, you know, I've held out some of the most important details, but they'll have it from me. I have to have something to hold on to. Something that remains mine. His hands started to buck against the cords he tied with the sheets as the weight of the dropship bunk on his neck continued to press down, and primal survival instincts demanded flight or fight. But this one last thing he could accomplish. He was sure Arabella would already have killed herself. This one last thing he could match her in. Pale blue eyes greeted him in the oncoming blackness. Smoke Jaguar Command, Mount Szabo, Jaguar Prime, Huntress, Kerensky Cluster, 3 October 3048. Con Leo Showers finished watching the interrogation recordings as his Sa-Con stood beside him. This is all of it. There have been no more deaths, he said, deep voice filling the office. The annoyance on Sa-Con Weaver's face spoke of a trial of grievance for allowing such an invaluable resource to be wasted. None, and I believe there may even be some good candidates for bondsmen. One in particular is surprisingly pliant, yet resilient and dedicated. Perhaps the heart of a smoked jaguar is there. He nodded, leaving such things to her capable hands. And your thoughts? This is unexpected, she said after a long pause, staring at the blank screen. The understatement of the century. He heaved out of the chair, mane of black hair rustling with his speed, and then stood in the center of his small office buried in the depths of Mount Szabo. It is more precious than the finest gift-take any warrior has seized from a battlefield, he said, light green eyes burning as he looked beyond his Sa-Con to new vistas he could now see. This Comstar vessel, this outbound light, our best understanding of the inner sphere since the traitorous Dragoons fell silent. It will shift the balance of power. We have here the means of defeating the Stravag Wardens in the Ground Council, and finally marching to war. The Great Father left a collapsed Star League and entrusted us with the hidden hope, which will become our destiny. The clan shall return to the inner sphere, and with our feet on their necks, raise the flag of the Star League once more. This short story entitled Hidden Destiny was written by Randall N and is an excerpt found within the BattleTech Legends book. Make sure to check BattleTech Legends out for more short fiction and some super interesting deep dives into iconic individuals in the BattleTech universe. And that brings us to an end of another deployment of BungleTech. Before we wrap up, I wanted to quickly honor our patron Loremasters, MagnumDanger and RetroLazer, in a limerick, because, well, they jokingly requested it thinking I wouldn't do it. MagnumDanger and RetroLazer, in the BattleTech world, they're the blazer. With swift moves and might, they conquer each fight.
Their victory dance appears Loremasters.
As always, you can find us via Discord, email, Twitter, and now Patreon, all linked in the description. And to both our current and future patrons, you mean the BattleTech world to us. In closing, I want to share a few words of wisdom from patron MechWarrior Lorian Sunrider. Snub PPCs are love. Snub PPCs are life. Short range of 9 makes everything a fair fight. Until next time, MechWarriors, good fortunes on the battlefield. Selah.
All podcast objectives complete. Podcast shutdown sequence initiated.